Hello there. This is Twelfth Night. We're all the way up to Act 4 and Act 5. You guys have been great with coming along on this. I'm ready to dive into the wonderful resolution of all of these knots, cogs, engine bits, scraps that we've been pulling together all over the place. And we're going to see how they all come together here at the end. But first, I have to ask, was there anything we galloped over last time? Because we were moving so fast, was there anything that you wanted to bring up or you had a question about that we didn't have time for?
No.
I guess the silence is a yes.
I think everybody's pretty good then. The only thing I skipped over that I particularly wanted to point out, if you're ever stuck for what to say for a thank you note, there's a great line in Act 3 where Sebastian tells Antonio, thanks, thanks, and ever thanks. You can't say it any better than that. It works every time. Just say it's from Shakespeare and people will be impressed.
Has Hallmark taken that on yet?
I have seen it in a few hand-drawn cards where somebody used it. But it's been very useful to me when I can't figure out what to say.
If you were in Italy, they could then say prego, prego, prego.
There you go.
What line was that on?
That's Act 3, Scene 3, line 15.
Oh, early on, yeah.
Act 3, Scene 3?
Mm-hmm. Line 15.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So when we get into Act 4, first we open up with Festi the Fool talking with Sebastian. Of course, he thinks it's Cesario. He's asking him, all right, so you say I wasn't sent for you. And you say you weren't just at the house. And you say you weren't on your way from Orsino. And okay, say my nose is not my nose. Say the sky is not the sky. He is completely fed up with Sebastian. Sebastian thinks, well, I've got a lunatic here. He tries to pay him off and push him down the road. Everybody keeps giving Festi money. He's apparently the only one that's making a living around here. Everybody else turns the money down. But there is one line in this scene that they often leave out of various versions. This is Act 4, Scene 1, line 30. The fool says, this will I tell my lady straight. I would not be in some of your coats for tuppence. What he's saying is Toby's come out and started to argue with Sebastian. He goes to tell on Toby. They usually leave that out so that it's like, how in the world does Toby get caught in the middle of all his shenanigans? Well, basically the fool steps in and says, okay, he's gone too far. We need to rein him back in. Of course, Olivia comes busting out and she is not happy to see Toby attacking her Cesario, as she thinks it is. She hollers it at Toby. Will it be ever thus? Ungracious wretch, fit for the mountains and the barbarous caves, where manners ne'er were preached, out of my sight. Be not offended, Cesario. Rudes be gone. Well, she's finally had it up to here. And so Toby and Andrew tuck and run, get out of the way, Fabian too.
Yes, I'd like to, there's Sebastian's aside here. This is worth reading because I think he is, no, they're still present, but it's a wonderful little rhyme here and it's an aside so no one else can hear it. What relish is in this? How runs the stream? Or I am mad, or else this is a dream. Let fancy still my sense in Lethe steep, if it be thus to dream. Still, let me sleep. So what's going on in his mind? This is something quite fantastic. And he's and Olivia, of course, says right there afterwards, nay, come, I prithee, wouldst thou be ruled by me? Sebastian,
Madam, I will.
I will. Indeed. Wonderful.
You also notice that Olivia says, go with me to my house and hear thou how many fruitless pranks this ruffian has botched up. Toby has been doing pranks and practical jokes and everything. He's got a long history of it. So the idea of him doing this thing with Malvolio is nothing unusual. And the fact that she finally gets upset with him over all this and doesn't just think it's kind of funny is because he's finally touched a nerve. He's gone after her true love there. And so he's stepped over the line at last. So, by the way, Debbie, hi. You snuck in there while we were already rolling. Good morning.
Yes.
So they cut back to Malvolio to see what's happening with him. First, Mariah and the fool are outside of the room where they're holding Malvolio. And Mariah has the fool dress up like the curate. And his name is Sir Topaz. And he puts on a gown and a beard. And usually in versions of it, it's pretty obvious that, you know, it's not the guy. It's not a very good disguise. But he doesn't really need the disguise because everybody who's outside of Malvolio's room knows who he is. And Malvolio never sees him. So he doesn't need to wear a disguise. But it's another case of people keep putting on disguises in this way. They keep covering up their true selves. And whenever somebody's wearing a lot of disguises in Shakespeare, you know, he's really aiming at, we have to uncover the true self. We have to give all the characters a chance to bring their real, true feelings out. And so that's kind of his little way of saying, okay, you know, we're going to have the reveal at some point. So get ready for it. It's coming. He's teasing the audience again. So when the fool is all dressed up like the curate, he starts imitating it. And a lot of this may not make sense because it's kind of the terminology of educated religious men of the time. But here we are in, by the way, Act 4, Scene 2, roundabout line 21 is when he comes in and finds Malvolio inside his little room. And Malvolio's calling out to whoever he can get attention of. Who calls there? Sir Topaz the curate, who comes to visit Malvolio the lunatic. There's no question that he's a lunatic. Everybody's settled on that. Sir Topaz, good Sir Topaz, go to my lady. Out, hyperbolical fiend. How vexest thou this man? Talkest thou of nothing but ladies? You know, he's turning around the words again. The fool is taking Malvolio's words and turning it into a joke. Of course, Malvolio doesn't get the joke, and you know, it wouldn't be funny to him even if he did. So.
Yeah.
But he starts drilling him on whether he is sane or insane. And the more you read it, the more you realize they both sound crazy. You know, he's imitating the religious men of the time who have all kinds of angel dancing on the head of a pin specifics that sound like lunacy to people that aren't involved in it. It's like anyone inside academia or a particular career or something. They have their own lingo. And to people outside, it sounds like lunacy. It sounds like they're trying to put one over on them. And, you know, that's not what he's trying to do, but that he is definitely talking his own talk and not adapting to Malvolio. Malvolio is talking his own talk and not adapting to the rest of the world. So the question of communication comes into this. How can you make your life right if you can't communicate? Did any of you have major problems with this scene?
I want to go back to what you just said about you can't make your light bright if you can't communicate.
Mhm.
Shakespeare's use of putting Malvolio totally in the dark.
Yeah.
I can't see anything. So you just made a light go up over my head. So,
Okay.
yeah. So if he's literally and figuratively in the dark.
In the dark. Yeah, Mariah makes a wonderful crack at about line 67. She says, "Thou mightest have done this without thy beard and gown. He sees thee not." So this disguise is obviously, since he's in the dark, no one can see it. So the disguise is really not necessary.
Good morning, Don. We saw you come in. So, hey. Yeah, the fool says, there is no darkness but ignorance. You know, it's very important to uncover your true self to yourself if you're trying to find love, but you also have to be able to convey yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, all that kind of stuff to the other person. It's not enough to just feel it and understand it yourself. You have to make the gift of it to another. And again, Shakespeare is kind of investigating how people communicate, how they don't communicate. And the fool is, you know, poking his stick in the middle of the works to see if he can either clog it up or get it rolling one way or the other. He comes up with a great line around about 53. What is the opinion of Pythagoras concerning wildfowl? Now, to us, this sounds like complete crazy talk. I don't care if it's Waterfowl Festival or not. This is still crazy talk. And Malvolio comes right back with the response that the soul of our grandam might happily inhabit a bird. Now, to us, this is just, they're both nuts. But at the time, that was not a crazy answer. That was bringing up some things that Pythagoras thought about reincarnation, and you might be reincarnated as a bean if you were a bad person, and you know, a goose might eat you, and it's a whole long involved argument. So at the time, it seemed like it was something that made a little bit of sense, and it would have been funny, like, oh yeah, I've heard people talking about that. But now it's a completely different joke. It's the joke of neither one of these guys are making any sense, and they both sound like lunatics. So
Transmigration of souls.
yeah, and transmigration of jokes.
Exactly.
And the fool says, nay, I am not for all waters. And Toby comes in. Do you want to, I think you have Toby down there at the bottom, don't you? Roundabout line 7.
Yes, I do. Toby, to him in thine own voice, and bring me word how thou findest him. I would we were well, and of this knavery he may be conveniently delivered. I would he were, for I am now so far in fence with my niece that I cannot pursue with any safety this sport of the upshot. Come by, and by to my chamber. And Toby and Maria exit there.
Is Toby having a change of heart?
Well, he said before that he didn't want it to go too far. And I think he realized he's doing his tap dancing now. He realizes he's gotten out on the thin ice, and he had better get somewhere a little better.
And it's not because he's a nice guy. It's because Olivia, he's in bad, he's in bad form with her, she's mad at him.
You got
So
it.
it's not because, he feels bad for Malvolio. He's looking out for number one.
Yeah, it's true. And that come by and by to my chamber. I've seen versions where that's given to talking to the fool, telling the fool to come and tell me how he likes it. But most of them, they have him deliver that line to Mariah, come to my bedroom, babe. And it changes the dynamics of the scene depending on who he says it to. And I find it interesting that Shakespeare didn't specify, left it up to the actors. You go where you want with this, what you will. Again, the subtitle of the play. There's a lot of leeway in this play. It lets the actors improvise and stretch things. They don't have to make up new words in order to have entirely different interpretations. So it's kind of a playwright's gift to the actors saying, I trust you to make this story work. And that's one of the reasons I find it so fascinating, because it can be done in so many different ways. At this point, we feel a song coming on.
Of course we do.
Why not?
um,
There's another instrument there.
yeah. Hey, little blue uke. Music, big theme in this play.
Indeed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. What's happening here with this this particular song? Fool, he sings in his own voice. Hey, Robin, jolly Robin, tell me how thy lady does. Malvolio, fool. And the fool continues to sing, my lady is unkind, perdie. Malvolio, fool. The fool continues to sing, alas, why is she so? Fool, I say. And sings again, she loves another. Who calls? Now, this song, going back and forth with the fool, you have to really hear it in performed, have it really make some sense here. But she loves another. And then Malvolio says, good fool, as ever thou wilt deserve well at my hand, help me to a candle and pen, ink, and paper. As I am a gentleman, I will live to be thankful to thee for it. And then Master Malvolio, I good fool. Alas, sir, how well you besides your 5 wits. Malvolio says, fool, there was never man so notoriously abused. I am as well in my wits, fool, as thou art. But as well, says the fool, then you are mad indeed, if you be no better than your wits than a fool. And Malvolio continues, they have here propertied me, keep me in darkness and ministers to me, asses, and do all that they can to face me out of my wits. And then advise you what you say. The minister is here, in the voice of Sir Topas. We have a change of his voice.
But it's interesting that this song comes in before all of this. It's like the fool has to show that he's his real self. The best way to do that is to sing. Again, it's a case of the music showing what people really feel. So the true fool is speaking in song. And not that I'm saying that musicians are fools necessarily, but fools back in the day were almost always musicians, as well as comedians, basically.
Yeah, telling truth to power.
Yep, telling truth to power.
I came in
And
late. Where are we? I came in late, so where are we?
we are in Act 4, Scene 2.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right.
About line 95 was where he quoted, but we just started to talk about music. And this was the first real musical. There were plays before this and spectacles that had music that went along with it, but not ones where the story was advanced by the music, and the lyrics told part of the story, and things like that. And this one in particular has music all through it. I started counting the number of songs in here, and at first I thought, oh, there's one or two. Well, no, let's see, the 1, 2, 3, 4, a couple of lines from this one, a couple of lines from that one. Oh yeah, Malvolio keeps quoting songs when he comes out in his special dress. It's all through it. It's a variety of songs. Somewhere they're carousing and everything are fun, but most of them are pretty melancholy.
Yeah.
You would think that in a comedy that's meant to be entertaining and fun and romantic, there would be more upbeat sort of songs, but it's like palate cleansers all the way through. Just a little down, just a little sad, and in a minor key, if you know about the music. And I think that's because this play makes the argument that love is like the ocean. It's overwhelming, it's powerful, it's mysterious, and it's inexplicable in so many ways. So you can never get it totally under your understanding. And I think that's why it's a little bit minor for me. That is what I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the slightly sad songs drag it down, or do you think it adds something to it?
Don't you think that comedy is sometimes used to sort of, well, cover up sadness and to relieve people who are feeling sad? So the play is comic, but the music is telling the truth about people's feelings.
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Yes.
I think too, music, we'll see in some other examples here, it's melancholy because the fool often is taking a kind of other point of view in the midst of laughter and this kind of chaos. The music can give you, even unintentionally, you can hear that tone of, well, the world is not all that great. There is sadness, there is melancholy there, and you can follow it in the song, but you can also, as you know from going to movies perhaps, hear a song, and it has a subtle, you remember the tune, but it can give you an insight into what's about to happen, or how this melody shows another reality, and it makes it marvelous. And it's hard for us to do this here without hearing it, but when you listen to them and listen to the singing and hear that kind of melancholy note, you'll see it fits in with the fool, who is allowed to look at things in a different angle.
Well, if you looked at, I'm just curious, if you looked at songs from that time period, I'm wondering if you wouldn't find that more of the songs are sad, because people could relate to them better. And, they want to hear the song with the story in it. And usually the story is a sad one.
That's true. Yeah.
What I wondered was, because this song ends in a hyphen, is it a common song that the audience would recognize and they would know what the next line is? So it calls for you to put it in, and the point is made even more strongly than what we can see.
Well, they think that his songs were his lyrics, Shakespeare's lyrics, but that the tunes were probably popular tunes of the day. So people would know how the song was going to go tune-wise, at least. And who knows, maybe they expected the audience to shout a line or something. But as I mentioned before, there was an interruption in performance of Shakespeare when the Puritans came into power, and a generation of actors didn't get to perform. So they lost the original tunes for most of the songs. And they've gone back to folk songs of the day and kind of matched them up to see how they fit with the lyrics. And they found songs from the day that fit with almost all the lyrics in this play. And so that's kind of the usual tune that people associate with the lyrics. But most places, they just get somebody to write new music for it. And it keeps it fresh and makes the audience more comfortable with it. You know, perhaps hearing something that's a little more like our music today, you know, lets you kind of relax in it.
I did hear it.
Somebody's
music.
checking in.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, sometimes they use rock music. It doesn't work quite as well. Something a little more soft seems to work better.
How are you, Tyson?
Susan, we can hear you.
I can hear you. It's all right. Suzanne treated me to an interesting book that she had in her collection of Shakespeare, which rivals probably anything short of the Folger Library. But it was a series of songs from Shakespeare. And I was amazed at how many different lyrics have been set to the same tune. That the rhythm is just right, and they're all, most of them do have a kind of a sad tone to them. But I was astounded because I know some of them, but I didn't know there were so many songs that there's no music here in our text. But then you'd hear it, and then you say, "Oh my gosh, full fathom 5, thy father lies, his bones are cold." That's been set to music, and it's been set to the same other lyrics set to the very same music, and it's amazing. But you're right, you can update all of this with band or have a Beatles song in the middle of something, and if it's appropriate, it works.
Yeah. So they're bibble babbling over the music here.
Oh, right. You know, it's a very specialized skill. and A lot
Susan.
of people don't like to do it.
Yoo-hoo, Susan, we can hear you.
That's right. That's right.
We can't mute her.
We can't mute her, not from here.
Oh, no, 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 don't
The
do
next
that.
song, the next, can we mute her? I don't know if
I
we
don't
can.
think
Gosh,
we can.
well, I know you miss you if that happens.
Yeah. Let's see if we can mute her. No, we can't get her out of there.
All right. Thank you, Tyson.
Well,
Bye-bye.
the next song that they sing is about it's line 127 in the same scene. I am gone, sir, and anon, sir. I'll be with you again. Obviously, this is like what he's doing with Malvolio. In a trice like to the old vice, your need to sustain. That vice is capitalized because in the very earliest plays, there was a character named Vice. Instead of there being people as the different characters, they had, you know, like love and vice and faith and charity were all different characters. And the vice is very much like Sir Toby, always getting out the liquor, always stirring up the pot with tricks and jests, and usually pretty rude. So that's what that's talking about. And Goodman Devil is another character. They always had a devil running in at some point that the main characters would have to fight off. And they were kind of like church plays. They would put them on parade through the town or put them on in the church even. And that evolved into the plays that we know today, the kind of plays we know
Right.
today.
Let me add something to what you just said. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Othello and with the character of Iago. And there's a lot of scholarship about the character who is Iago. But as Suzanne just said, there are some references that Iago is not a real person, but he is vice. And
Mhm.
that makes it go into a kind of very different kind of play, kind of morality play or
The
something.
morality plays.
Much more, I shouldn't say primitive, but earlier. And it puts an end to all this discussion about what is the motivation psychologically of Iago and his effect on Othello.
Well, then we get into scene 3, Act 4, scene 3. Sebastian's walking around talking to himself. This is the air. This is the glorious sun. This pearl she gave me, I feel it. I see it. And though it's 'tis wonder that enwraps me thus, it's not madness. He's trying to figure out what's going on. He's shown up someplace. People have attacked him, thought he was somebody else, claimed to love him, given him jewels, given him kisses, probably. He's kind of stymied at this point, but he's trying to figure out, where's the problem here? Am I crazy? Is this place crazy? Or is there something else going
I put in my notes, "Oh, brave new world"
on?
for Sebastian. He doesn't know what's happening, and it's beautifully done. That whole passage is really wonderful.
He says that it must be some error. It's not madness. Okay, he points out that Olivia manages her work. You know, that she takes care of this, pointing out her jobs to the servants and commanding what to be done. And she, has this beautiful household that's running spick and span and ship shape and everything. And so she's obviously not a lunatic, because she couldn't pull this off if she were. So he thinks there's some error here, and he's just a little unsteady. It's another one of those cases where Shakespeare is trying to make everybody unsteady, and he's very aware that I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I exactly am. But at the same time, there's a hopefulness. He doesn't just say, I'm out of here, these lunatics, He's hopeful. He lets himself go along with it for a while. It's kind of the trick that I find with listening to Shakespeare anytime. You got to just have hope. You got to go with it for a little while and let it soak in, and trust that sooner or later the understanding will catch up with you. I know it's so hard with the strange language early on, but we can catch up with it. We can certainly catch up with it. I've told people before that you can look at versions that do the Shakespeare in modern language, things like this. Here's a manga version of Shakespeare. Here's what it looks like. It's a comic book. Here's Malvolio in his special little outfit. And it's all in enough of Shakespeare so you can tell his lines informed it, but it's basically modern language. And I've had people ask me, why don't we just do it in modern language all the time? Wouldn't that simplify things a great deal? And I think it's a good first step, but I really hope that everybody continues past it to the point of getting to the actual Shakespearean language, because the language is as musical as the music that's in it. I'll say that dreaded phrase, iambic pentameter. There's a heartbeat in the language. It's got a rhythm to it. It goes all the way through. It gives it a propulsion, and it happens underneath your consciousness. You're not hearing it, at least if it's done right. You're not hearing it like a drum beat. You're hearing it more like a heartbeat, where you're not aware of it most of the time, but it gives it a human rhythm. It makes the actors slow down and breathe and feel and let themselves ride it comfortably. They don't get strained doing it. It carries emotion, just like the heart carries the blood. You know, the iambic pentameter carries the emotion throughout.
If I might make a comment on that, Suzanne and I were talking last night about this very phenomenon about the language of Shakespeare. And if you were to take, for example, any sonnet of Shakespeare's and look in one of those study guides and they translate it into simple English, all of a sudden, you may not have any insight, but you feel like you've been deprived of a whole world of not only of the pulsing kind of rhythm in the end couplets where they're rhyming, you have a, with all due respect to a legal brief, it's just cut and dry. There's no ambiguity. There's no poetry. And I'm thinking of, for example, take the King James version of the Bible and the 23rd Psalm, and then you see it put in plain English, and it's all of a sudden it goes flat, like the air came out of the balloon.
Yeah.
So I agree with Suzanne. I think we need to learn to appreciate Shakespeare's language, and once you get familiar with it, it opens up a whole world that straight prose just doesn't quite meet.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a little learning to get to it. But then again, I still don't know what the Beach Boys were singing about in some of their songs where they were talking about cars. So, I need to learn about cars so that I can understand what they're singing about. And, sometimes you need to learn a little something before you can understand what Shakespeare's talking about. But
It's all about beach culture. That's a whole other subject.
It's rewarding in itself, learning something new and then and finding a way into a new world with it, which is what we're doing, trying to do with this.
Exactly.
So Sebastian is trying to figure out in scene 3, what have I fallen into? He says, I've lost Antonio. He wasn't at the Elephant, so we know that he did not abandon Antonio. We have that reinforced. Either I'm in a madhouse or the lady's mad. But no, well, Olivia comes in. She has a solution for his whole problem. Let's get married. And she's actually asking him to get betrothed. At the time, betrothal had the legal force of marriage. It was a binding contract. But it was like a step down from marriage. You had some things you could do and some things you couldn't do when you were betrothed. It gave you some of the perks of being married, but not all of them.
Engaged. Would that be the term?
No, it's stronger than engaged, because it was a legal thing. If you got betrothed to someone and then did not marry them, you could be sent to jail.
That your breach of promise all arose from that.
There you go. That's exactly it. And so when she calls him husband later on, you may think that means they got married, but no, if you were betrothed, you were allowed to call one another husband and wife, because it was essentially the step before. You were walking up the aisle at that point, so they considered that binding.
Would that be like the publishing of the banns?
Yeah, that is part of being betrothed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
They used to have to announce that someone was going to get married enough in advance so that if anyone had any complaints about it, they could get there and say it. Shakespeare and his wife had to pay extra to be able to get married without having the banns put up, because his wife-to-be was something like couple of months pregnant. We don't know exactly, when, but at least 3 or 4 months pregnant when they got married. And so they had to pay so they didn't have to read the banns. This was done all the time, but it was kind of a moneymaker for the church because, they got a little cash there for people that were in a particular hurry. but you had to read the banns, you had to be betrothed. It was like all these legal steps going up to being married, and that was just the last thing. So
But
What
when,
was interesting, I seem to remember from my old history classes that in Elizabethan England, a boy could marry at the age of 14 and a girl at the age of 12, which I think is too young, by the way, but
it was
that
it was
does put a
allowed.
difference, does put a different slant on it. And I think it wasn't when Sir Thomas More came along and said, maybe 18 and 22 were the proper ages to.
Well, it was allowed to get married young, but it was not usual. When Shakespeare got married at age 18, that was unusual because most men did not marry until they were at least in their mid-20s. And so he was very young. And his wife was in her mid-20s, but that was the usual age for women to get married then. It's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect. They were allowed to get married very early, but they usually didn't do it because you were expected to have a place to live before you got married. If the man was supposed to have some sort of a living set up, and since it was all about the contracts and arranging things between the families, they made sure that all that was set up. So most people did not get married until they were at least in their 20s. And
Isn't it true that you could be betrothed for like 10 years or?
yes, you could be betrothed for a very long time. Usually it was the aristocrats that got married younger because it was all about tying various noble houses and inheritances and everything together. But the usual people, they would wait because, for the women, once you were married, you were pretty much property. So they had every reason to, want to go on by themselves for a while. And the men too, they were allowed to have a lot more fun, when they were bachelors than they were allowed as householders. So,
But I think if you were apprenticed to someone, your apprenticeship didn't end until you were in your 20s. So I guess that went along with it all.
yeah, and you weren't allowed to marry if you were an apprentice without your boss's permission. So a lot of rules about it back then.
Exactly. I'd like to comment on the very final part of that exchange between Sebastian and Olivia. This is about line 33. Sebastian says, "I'll follow this good man and go with you, and having sworn truth, ever will be true." And Olivia, "Then lead the way, good father, and heaven so shine that they may fairly note this act of mine." Now there are rhyme couplets there, and you don't want to emphasize it too much, but it kind of puts an end to that scene with the summing up of that rhyme, and it's and Sebastian too is just kind of wonderful, I'll go with you wherever that may be, but the rhyming sort of brings something interesting there. It's musical, and it also kind of brings a coda in the end.
And you also sense of communion.
Yes, exactly.
What do we think about Sebastian jumping in after having just met this woman and getting married practically the same hour?
Seemed to fall in love very quickly. I mean, as soon as Orsino realized that Cesaria was a woman, I mean, he was all ready to get married to her too, without even having seen her out of her disguise. So
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't seem to waste a lot of time.
Before the play is over, they need to.
Yep. I think both Viola and Sebastian are kind of willing to go with the flow. They're not complainers particularly. They'll kind of go where they're taken by circumstance. And the fact that they got where they are by circumstance throwing them on the beach,
by the flow. More
Yeah.
water.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we
Yep.
should talk about water. Oh my goodness. So many scenes about the sea and the water. I started marking them in my book, and pretty soon I just had lines.
Everywhere.
I had lines everywhere. I had to stop doing it because I couldn't read anything. I had John's problem.
Suzanne and I have both read this book, and it's entitled At the Bottom of Shakespeare's Ocean. And we may talk about this towards the end of our session, but there are many, many references in Shakespeare to the ocean, and it takes on a whole series of different kind of meanings depending on the nature of the play. Recommended.
It's a good one. Well, Act 5.
Here we go.
Okay, so the fool and Fabian are going back and forth. Fabian wants to get Malvolio's letter away from the fool. Fool, it says, you can ask me anything, but don't ask me one thing. What's that? Don't ask me for the letter. It's the only thing he's asking, back and forth. Some of this is topical humor. Queen Elizabeth gave a dog to one of her cousins and then immediately said, where's that dog I used to have? And kept borrowing the dog back. So the guy never got to spend any time with the dog. And the Fabian says, this is to give a dog and in recompense desire my dog again. Everybody at the time would have laughed. It was a common occurrence. Everyone knew about it, that the Queen had done this. And, of course, he can't mention the Queen, but he can give a little elbow to everyone there. Orsino finally gets off the couch and comes over. We know now the cogs are all coming together. Orsino's become a man of action. He's ridden his horse over to Olivia's house. He says to the fool, I know thee well. Basically, up to this point, the fool's the only person besides Cesario that can go all over the place. And the fool makes a few little jokes at his expense, and then he starts trying to get money out of him. Primo, segundo, tertio. He's talking about, he gave him one coin, he gave him a second coin, he gave him wait, where's that third coin? And he's trying to get the third coin out of him. He talks about musical triplets. He talks about bells that bing, bong, bing, that have 3 rings.
The triplex.
Yeah. And
Tripping.
he's using everything he can to get one more coin out. It's a challenge to him. Excuse me a minute. He says, Marry, sir, a lullaby to your bounty until I come again. There's music all through this. I'm getting a cough. Why don't you take over for a minute?
Okay. In comes Viola. Here comes the man, sir, that did rescue me. And Orsino, what's Orsino's response to this? Right after that, this is around line 40, 46. Here comes the man that did rescue me. Anyone?
Sorry about that, everybody.
Sorry.
Got to get a cough drop. Yeah.
Well, notice Orsino says, that face of his I do remember well. Yet when I saw it last, it was besmeared as black as Vulcan in the smoke of war. A bobbling vessel was the captain of. For shallow draught and bulk unprizable, with which such scatheful grapple did he make, with the most noble bottom of our fleet, that every envy and the tongue of loss cried fame and honor on him. What's the matter? what is Orsino's feelings there? He remembers the face. Yet it was besmeared as black as Vulcan in the smoke of war.
It was during war.
Yes?
Was it that he didn't recognize him at first?
It
Or,
appeared that way.
I mean, he recognized him, but he didn't know why. He was trying to figure out what it
oh,
was.
yeah, okay.
The officer steps in and says, this is Antonio that took the Phoenix. You know, he
Mhm.
talks about the fight. Viola says, he did me a kindness. He helped me out in the middle of the sword fight. And, but then he started talking crazy. Again, somebody talking crazy. Orsino says to him, notable pirate. This is around line 65. Notable pirate, thou saltwater thief. What foolish boldness brought thee to their mercies, whom thou in terms so bloody and so dear hast made thine enemies? Why have you put yourself in the clutches of your enemies? Antonio's answer is, a witchcraft drew me hither. Line 75.
Isn't it love that drove him hither?
Yeah, witchcraft drew me hither. That most ingrateful boy, there by your side. From the rude seas enraged and foamy mouth, did I redeem. A rack past hope he was. His life I gave him, and did thereto add my love, without retention or restraint, and his in dedication. For his sake did I expose myself, pure for his love, into the danger of this adverse town, drew to defend him when he was beset, where, being apprehended, his false cunning, not meaning to partake with me in danger, taught him to face me out and his acquaintance, and grew a 20 years removed thing, while one with wink denied me mine own purse, which I had recommended to his use, not half an hour before. And Viola, how can this be?
So Antonio pours out his confusion and his hurt at this point. He says, my love brought me here. I risked my neck for him. I stepped in when he was in danger. And he pretends he doesn't know me. He even won't give me my own money back. He's totally devastated by this. And
Yeah, he's not angry.
he's very
He's
hurt.
not angry. He's hurt.
Yes. And Orsino comes to the one practical point there. When did he come to this town? And he said, oh, you know, today, but for months he's been with me. He says, well, that's crazy. For months he's been here with me. And everybody kind of blinks and looks in different directions. They're all like, how can that be? That's totally illogical. We can't be both places at once. And Olivia comes in. Line 96. Here comes the Countess. Now heaven walks on earth. Famous line.
Yeah.
And well, heaven walks in and basically pops his balloon. He is thinking, you know, this is so wonderful. We're finally face to face. I'm going to get a chance to really show her how much I love her. But all of this confusion is getting in his way, getting in her way. She's very clear. What would my lord, but that what he may not have? You know, ask me anything, but don't ask me that. She's very clear about that. Cesario, doing like she's always done, is standing over with Orsino and kind of, trying to be the page and everything. And Olivia's like, Cesario, come on, don't be afraid of greatness. Take up the mantle. She's trying to be encouraging to him. And Cesario says, my lord would speak, my duty hushes me. Olivia says, if it be aught to the old tune, lord, it is fat and fulsome as howling after music. Again with the music. She says, your love song is as bad as listening to hyenas barking.
Right.
She just will have none of it.
Still so cruel, says her.
Still so constant, Lord.
Yes.
You gotta have some admiration for her, because she is status wise under Orsino, but
Is she?
standing firm.
Is she under Orsino?
Status
Or
wise, she
is
would be under, but not his liege, his liege man. She's not under him in a feudal sense, but she is considered status wise lesser than him.
Okay, because I had thought that they were equal, and that's why I could stand up to him.
Well, he is referred to as the Duke most of the time. There are a few places where they screw up and they call him a count, but usually he's a Duke. So a Duke would be higher than a count or a countess. So, status wise, they're not so far apart, because everyone who was an aristocrat was considered kind of in the same boat.
Yeah.
But Orsino is a little bit ahead of her.
Okay.
The fact that she's standing firm, I think, is a nice touch there. But what perverseness! You uncivil lady. You just cannot believe it. He loses his temper.
He does indeed. Yeah. Yeah. To whose ingrate and unauspicious altars my soul, the faithfulest offerings, have breathed out that ere devotion tendered. What shall I do? And Olivia,
Even what it please my lord shall become him.
Yeah. Why should I not? Had I the heart to do it? Like to the Egyptian thief at point of death, kill what I love? A savage jealousy that comes, sometimes savors nobly. But hear me this, since you to none regardance cast my faith, and what I partly know, the instrument that screws me from my true place in your favor. Live you the marble-breasted tyrant still, but this your minion, whom I know you love, and whom, by heaven I swear, I tender dealing, him will I tear out of that cruel eye, where he sits crowned in his master's spite. Come, my boy, with me. My thoughts are ripe in mischief. I'll sacrifice the lamb, but I do love, despite a raven's heart within doubt.
He says, I'm out of here. I know that Cesario is in your favor where I should be, but I love Cesario too. So I'm going to take him away, and maybe I'll kill him. Who knows? He's ranting at this point. I'll do anything. I don't know what I'll do. I'll do something big and dramatic, and everyone will look at me and say what a true lover I am, because I am so torn up by love. And Viola actually finally says her love. This is line 135. And I, most jocund, apt, and willingly, to do you rest 1,000 deaths would die. She'll do anything. She'll die for him. And Olivia says, well, where are you going, Cesario? After him I love, more than I love these eyes, more than my life, more by all mores than ever I shall love wife. And
Where are you right now? Which one's in?
171.
170,
Um,
okay.
Olivia says, "Oh my, I am detested." She's just broken up. Her husband said, "I'm in love with this guy over here." She is completely just, I don't know what to do now. How am I beguiled? And Viola is like, who beguiles you? Nobody, who does you wrong? And she says, "Have you forgotten? It's been an hour. Okay, get the priest back out here." So Orsino says, "Let's get out of here." Olivia says, "Whither, my lord?" "Cesario, husband, stay."
Yeah,
Husband,
there's the grand reveal here.
husband. Aye, husband, can that he deny? "Her husband, sirrah," says Orsino. And Viola says, "No, my lord, not I." It's the big reveal, somebody's gotten betrothed, somebody who looks just like Viola. And Olivia says, "Okay, I understand. You're scared to step up and take up the greatness that you've been given. But it's okay. It's your time. You're the count. You're going to be the count. So you need to step up and stand up for yourself and everything." The priest comes out and says, "Well, yeah, they're betrothed. This is he talks about love as a ritual, another aspect of love. For him, love is something that you have to go in the church to verify. You have to go in the church to make legal. You have to go in the church to go through the steps that make it legal. You have to have the kiss, you have to have the ring, you have to have the priest, you have to have all your little ducks in a row, and then you have love. That's where it comes from. So it's another version of love. It says 2 hours ago they got betrothed. I swear it, and I bless them. It's done. And Orsino, his mouth drops open around about line 172.
He's really distressed. "Oh, thou dissembling cub, what wilt thou be when time hath sowed a grizzle on thy case? Or will not else thy craft so quickly grow, that thine own trip shall be thine overthrow? Farewell, and take her, but direct thy feet where thou and I henceforth may never meet." And Viola, "My lord, I do protest." Olivia, "Oh, do not swear, hold little faith, though thou hast too much fear."
Orsino says, "If you're that evil when you're this young, when you're old, oh my God, what a devil you're going to be." Yeah, such a great way to put somebody down. Well, here he is immediately. Cesario, who he's trusted, he loves and everything, throws him aside. All that rationality of asking the practical question, it's gone. His emotions have come up to the forefront. He's lost his rationality at this point. And speaking of the loss of rationality, in runs Andrew. "Oh, for the love of God, send a surgeon." You got it, Peggy. He comes in. He's got wounded head. He's got
All
blood.
bloody,
And he says, "Well, he's hurt us. We need a surgeon. Sir Toby needs a surgeon. I can't believe he was so cruel, even though we started it. But anyway, I can't believe he was so cruel. And he's a real devil. And who are you talking about?" "Oh, Cesario." "Cesario?" And everyone looks at Viola, and
It's wonderful when you see it on the stage. Yeah, these gestures back and forth.
he's broken my head across. And then he sees Cesario, Viola, and goes, "Ah!" and runs off. And so they go to see what happens. Toby comes out. Here comes Sir Toby halting, and he's creeping in. He's drunk.
But of course.
The surgeon's drunk. And Toby says, I hate a drunken rogue. Well, here's another person that needs to learn a little bit more about himself. He says, well, we had this fight and, that's the end of it. He doesn't want to talk about it because he got the worst of it, basically. And Sir Andrew says, well, that's all right, Sir Toby, come with me and we'll get our wounds dressed. And Toby turns on him. He says, will you help? An asshead and a coxcomb and a knave, a thin-faced knave, a gull. Depending on how he delivers this, it can be vicious, or it can be just a couple of drunk guys kind of calling each other a son of a bitch. It can go either way, but it stops everything for a second. And I think it lets a little bit of Toby's true feelings out. He realizes that he's not keeping the best company, and he's doing it for less than noble reasons. And there's a little bit of self-understanding for a glimmer there, but then they send him off stage to get looked to. So we'll see what he does with it. Then Sebastian comes in. Now this last bit in Act 5, Scene 1, where Sebastian comes in, it takes a really long time before they acknowledge one another. Viola and Sebastian are finally together, but it takes forever for them to make those last few steps to one another. The first couple of times I saw it, I thought, why don't they just run up to one another and throw their arms around one another and start crying and laughing and everything? Well, you have to keep in mind, for one thing, there's a certain amount of talk about, am I looking at a ghost? When they talk about spirit and whether the spirit has those elements that I was born with, they're talking about the body. Is this a spirit that looks like the person, or is this a real person? And so there's a certain hesitancy there. But I think also they've been running around with a bunch of crazy talking people, and they just got to kind of slow down.
Yeah, Sebastian's words are wonderful if you want to follow there. But line 219, Sebastian speaks. I'm sorry, madam, I have hurt your kinsman. But had it been the brother of my blood, I must have done no less with wit and safety. You throw a strange regard upon me, and by that I do perceive it hath offended you. Pardon me, sweet one, even for the vows we made each other, but so late ago. And Orsino. One face, one voice, one habit, and two persons, a natural perspective that is and is not. Again, you see this on stage, total confusion.
Yeah.
It's just trying to, depending on the actor, you can sort of see some kind of dawning realization.
But you notice that Sebastian is starting to fix all the little problems. He says, we became betrothed 2 hours ago. His first words to Antonio are, how the hours have racked and tortured me since I lost thee. So one by one, all those little misconceptions and confusions are being put to rest.
The tangled knot.
Yeah, all the knots are finally coming untied. But Antonio's response, how have you made division of yourself? He's astonished.
Magic.
He says, an apple cleft in two is not more twin than these two creatures. Which is Sebastian? Olivia says,
Most wonderful.
most wonderful.
I kind of like it, she says.
wonderful.
If one is good, two is better. We know where Olivia's coming from.
Right.
And they start talking to one another as if they're trying to figure out who this stranger is that might be a relative. And reading it, it's hard to convey, but when you see it,
Mhm.
there's this wonderful feeling of all our prayers have been answered. There's a serenity and reward in this scene. You've been waiting so long for them to get together, and all of these people running around with their little love tales and romantic problems and everything. This is the true bond that they're trying to put together in this play. It's the brother and sister. And you probably know that Shakespeare lost a son who was a twin not too long before this was written, like a couple of years before. And, you know, he had a daughter at home who had been a twin and lost her twin brother. And you can't help but think that this is where his heart is. He wants the brother and sister back again. And the long discussion of, is this just a spirit? He's imagining, if only my son could come back, what would it be like? What would they say? And even though he doesn't specifically say anything about that, you can feel it in the writing. You can feel the emotion welling up. You can feel the longing pulling at them both.
Yeah, the longing for something to be true that you're not yet sure is true. And it's when you see this acted, there's a kind of a slowing down of the momentum and a looking into the other's eyes with a hope that what I hope might be true, but not quite sure yet. So it's beautifully described. In fact, maybe you and I could I'll do Sebastian. You want to do viola, right?
We're at
About right here, looking at viola, Sebastian.
242.
Yeah, a little higher up. 236.
236. Okay.
Yeah, and Sebastian looking at viola. Do I stand there? I never had a brother, nor can there be that deity in my nature of here and everywhere. I had a sister whom the blind waves and surges have devoured of charity. What kin are you for me? What country? What name? What parentage?
Messalene. Sebastian was my father. Such a Sebastian was my brother too. So when he suited to his watery tomb, if spirits can assume both form and suit, you come to fright us.
A spirit I am indeed, but am in that dimension grossly clad, which from the womb I did participate. Were you a woman, as the rest goes even, I should my tears let fall upon your cheek and say, thrice welcome, drowned Viola.
That's the first time her name is used in the whole play. Even the sea captain doesn't call her by her name. You know, back when she first came, her true identity has come out. And she has met one of her first true loves, her brother, who she's known longer than anyone else.
And it's wonderful.
It's a good thing their father didn't take care of that mole.
Yes. And it's a marvelous slow revelation. And it's as I said, beautiful on stage.
And she mentions that there's a sea captain who has her dress and all her other lady things, and you know, they'll get that in there. But then she remembers that the sea captain is not available because Malvolio's put him in jail, and Olivia and Orsino say, well, get him over here and let's find out what's going on and go get Malvolio. Let's straighten this out. And they send for Malvolio. Here we go. We're in Act 5, Scene 1, around about 295. They start sending off for Malvolio. The fool says, well, he sent this letter and hands over the letter that Malvolio wrote. They try to get the fool to read it, but he keeps joking around, making voices like a crazy person. Just making noises and, pretending that that's the way a crazy person would sound. So they give the letter to Fabian. You want to read
Right.
Fabian's? This is
Fabian
around
reads.
315.
And Fabian snatches it, or actually, it's
Olivia snatches
Olivia
it.
snatches it, yes. This is about line 315. Fabian. By the Lord, madam, you wrong me, and the world shall know of it. Though you have put me into darkness and given your drunken cousin the over me, yet have I benefit of my senses as well as your ladyship. I have your own letter that induced me to the semblance that I put on, with which I doubt not, but to do myself much right, or you much shame. Think of me as you please. I leave my duty little unthought, and speak out of my injury. The madly used Malvolio.
They say, he sounds like he's pretty rational. So let's send for him and bring him in here. But in the meanwhile, Orsino says, well, first I have to say, Olivia realizes that she's maybe stepped a little too far in response to Orsino's suit. And she says, well, okay, on second thought, I'm going to pay for everybody to get married. So, let's have that just settled and don't be mad at me. Orsino turns to Viola. This is around 334, 336. Madam, I am most apt to embrace your offer. And then he turns to Viola. Your master quits you, and for your service done him, so much against the mettle of your sex, so far beneath your soft and tender breeding, and since you called me master for so long, here is my hand. You shall from this time be your master's mistress. So they're finally together. Woohoo!
Yes.
And then in comes Malvolio.
Yeah, you've done me wrong.
Madam, you have done me wrong. He's pissed. He is hurt. He has good reason to be. Sometimes you see him come in looking like he's been on the rack for a few days. He definitely is messed up, dirty. There's one version where he's holding on to his toupee very, very firmly as his one last bit of dignity that's left to him. He's pitiful. Your heart goes out to him. He doesn't know why all this has gone on. He hands over the letter and says, peruse this. I have done everything you asked. I wore the yellow stockings. I wore the cross garters. I was rude to your kinsmen. I bossed everyone around. I talked politics when I shouldn't. I did everything. And I did it all in a true, sincere hope of favor. And tell me why you put me through this. And Olivia says, alas, Malvolio, this is not my writing. Then everything stops. And Fabian finally gets his chance to make a few more things right. He steps up He says, good madam, hear me speak. This is around 380. Let no quarrel or no brawl to come taint the condition of this present hour. He's trying to be a peacemaker. In hope it shall not. Most freely I confess, myself and Toby set this device upon Malvolio here, upon some stubborn and uncourteous parts we had conceived against him. So first he says, we were pretty rotten to him. Maria wrote the letter at Sir Toby's great importance. He says Maria was in on it, but it's not her fault. Toby talked her into it. In recompense whereof he hath married her. Well, the Globe version has a nice little aside where Mariah goes, hooray. Just a tiny little hooray. How with sportful malice it was followed may pluck on laughter rather than revenge. If the injuries were justly weighed on both sides had passed, he says basically we had our reasons, and if you knew all our reasons, you wouldn't feel like we had gone too far. But well, it's done, and we should laugh about it. It wasn't about revenge, though I did see a comedian last night who said, revenge. It's not nutritious, but it sure does taste good.
Right.
Olivia says to Malvolio, alas, poor fool, how have they baffled thee? The fool comes in.
Yep.
This is around 393.
393. Here we go. Right.
Some are born great.
Yep. Why? Some are born great. Some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. I was one, sir, in this interlude, one Sir Topus, sir, but that's all one. By the Lord, fool, I am not mad. But do you remember, madam, why laugh you so? Why laugh you at such a barren rascal? And you smile not. He's gagged. And thus the whirligig of time brings in his revenge.
They admit that he hath been most notoriously abused. And Malvolio says, I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you. But we can't end a comedy with somebody going off mad. So Orsino sends someone to bring him to a peace. Everybody's found their respective other as much as possible. Everybody's found a little bit more truth in themselves, except maybe Malvolio, but they're going to work on him. Everything's coming together. And what you need at the end is a song and a dance to make sure everybody is all together. Everyone's in harmony at the end. So they start singing.
Run in, please.
When that I was and a little tiny boy with the hey-ho, the wind and the rain, a foolish thing was but a toy, for the rain it raineth every day. They have a little dance, they all dance together, even Malvolio, and everyone smiles and begs for everyone to clap at the end because Shakespeare never left it to chance that the people would know what to do. And so that is Twelfth Night. Thank you so much for coming with us. We loved your comments. And any other questions? Any other comments?
Suzanne, you are incredible. Thank you, John. Thanks so much.
Thank you both. Yes, very much. Learned a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
we've striven.
I would like to second that. I thank you both so very much
thank you.
for your
And
efforts.
if we've whetted your appetite, in January, the Talbot County Free Library in Easton is going to be showing some Shakespeare on Saturdays, which I'll be introducing, but there'll be fairy stories. We'll be doing Midsummer Night's Dream and Tempest.
Wonderful.
And, so if you get the urge in the middle of the cold months when it's dark all the time to have some light come in, come on down and see us. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Great,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks and
forward.
thanks
Wonderful.
and thanks
Being
ever.
on real
Yes.
stage sometime. Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.